As the door to his cell slammed shut, Diddy was forced to confront a reality he had never imagined. The once untouchable mogul, a symbol of success and power, was now reduced to an anonymous inmate, stripped of his wealth, status, and influence. His days in the world of luxury and privilege were gone, replaced by the harsh, unforgiving structure of prison life. Behind bars, there was no red carpet, no bodyguards, no flashing cameras, just the cold, oppressive reality of survival. The man who had once shaped the music industry now found himself at the mercy of a system that cared little for his past fame. What lay ahead was a nightmare far darker than he could have ever anticipated. The prison that swallowed legends. But that all seemed like a distant memory now, the bright lights of fame fading into the shadows of MDC Brooklyn. It was a stark, unforgiving place, a far cry from the glitz and glamour Diddy was used to. The air inside the facility was thick, heavy with the scent of metal and decay. It was the kind of place where time moved in slow motion, and the sounds of clanking trays, shouted curses, and whispered insults filled the air. There were no cameras here, no publicists ready with polished statements, just the raw, unvarnished reality of prison life. The moment Diddy entered, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The energy of the building seemed to change, as if the very walls recognized who had entered. Some of the men who had been lounging against the walls of the holding area straightened up, eyes narrowing like wolves watching a new animal stumble into their den. Others openly snickered and muttered his name under their breath, as if they couldn't believe the man who once seemed untouchable was now here, vulnerable like everyone else. In that moment, Diddy wasn't Sean Combs, the mogul. He was Sean Combs, the inmate, number 28,360,084. A man reduced to nothing more than a number, like so many others who had come before him. The weight of the chains, Diddy's first moments in prison. For Diddy, it must have been an overwhelming realization. The cuffs on his wrists were cold, a reminder of his new status in this world. They were not the luxury accessories he once wore, symbols of his success and power, but harsh, unyielding restraints. He stood there, motionless for a moment, the weight of the situation settling in as the reality of where he was and why hit him. His eyes, once sharp and full of calculated ambition, now looked lost, almost desperate, as they scanned his surroundings. Diddy's gaze lingered on the bars of the holding cell, as if searching for some kind of answer, some kind of way out. But there was none. This was it. The harsh steel and concrete, the cold, unfeeling environment. It wasn't just the physical walls that confined him. It was the weight of everything he had lost. His empire was gone, reduced to rumors, legal battles, and public scandal. The man who had once been revered was now just another inmate, and no amount of money or influence could change that. The humiliation of the strip search. The first few moments inside were a brutal wake-up call for Diddy. A guard, indifferent to his status, ordered him to strip. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by luxury and opulence, the process of disrobing in front of strangers in a prison was likely one of the most humbling experiences of his life. His expensive suit, which likely cost more than most people's annual salaries, came off first. It was the kind of suit that commanded attention, a piece of clothing designed to be seen under flashing lights and cameras. Now, it was just a useless heap of fabric on the floor. As he undressed, layer by layer, Diddy's body seemed to deflate with each piece that hit the floor. The transformation was symbolic. No longer the powerful, untouchable mogul. He was now just another man, stripped of everything that made him different. The only thing left was his body, his physical form, exposed and vulnerable, There was no grandeur in this moment, no escape from the humiliation. Diddy stood there, naked and vulnerable, just like every other man who had entered that place. There was no entourage to protect him, no bodyguards to shield him from the harsh reality of his new life. The world that had once worshipped him now saw him as just another inmate, one who had to earn his place in this brutal, unforgiving environment. The cold reality of prison life. As Diddy stood in the processing area, receiving his prison-issued uniform, the reality of his situation settled in like a heavy weight. The orange jumpsuit, rough and unyielding, marked the end of his life as a mogul. No longer would he be the man who controlled the industry with a flick of his wrist. Now, he was simply inmate number 28,360,084. The number, stark and impersonal, was a reminder that in here, his identity was stripped away. The jumpsuit smelled stale, its fabric a far cry from the luxurious suits he had worn in his empire-building days. The material was coarse and itchy, not the soft, tailored feel he was used to. As he tugged the suit over his body, each movement felt like an acceptance of his new life, one he had never imagined. For a moment, he hesitated, his fingers tracing the fabric as though trying to summon some part of the old him, some trace of the man who had once been untouchable. But there was no escaping it. The suit was more than just clothing. It was a symbol of his fall. His pride, once infinite, was now a shadow, and the weight of that realization was almost too much to bear. The power of silence. Diddy's first night in prison. That night, Diddy sat alone in his cell. Gone were the lavish parties, the expensive dinners, and the comforts of his celebrity lifestyle. Instead, he found himself on a thin mattress, wrapped in a blanket that felt more like burlap than anything remotely comforting. The walls of the cell were bare, save for the harsh, fluorescent light that buzzed above him, casting a sterile, unforgiving glow over everything. The sounds of the prison were constant: clanging trays, men shouting, the occasional scream or laughter. But in Diddy's cell, there was silence. He wasn't used to silence. He had spent his life in a world of noise, of cameras flashing and people constantly shouting his name. But here, there was only the hum of the building and the weight of his own thoughts. He didn't eat the dinner that was brought to him. It was a sad, uninspired meal. Some kind of meatloaf that tasted like wet cardboard, mashed potatoes that were more mush than food, and green beans that looked like they'd been sitting in a can for far too long. Even the rats in the cell block avoided the food, and Diddy, too, pushed the tray aside. Maybe he thought someone would bring him something better. Someone from his old life, perhaps. But no one came. There was no one left to help him now. The long road ahead. Diddy's struggle for survival. By the third day, hunger began to eat at him. The pride that had once made him dismiss the meager meals disappeared, replaced by the gnawing ache of reality. His stomach growled, but he ate quickly, as if trying to hide his shame. The prison didn't care about his wealth or his past. It didn't care about his name or his influence. It cared only about survival. Diddy's transformation wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual, and psychological. He had been reduced from mogul to inmate, from king to pawn. The guards didn't have to touch him. Their words were enough. Every sarcastic remark, every sneer, was a reminder of the life he had lost. The silence that squeezes. The soul silence isn't always peaceful. The kind that crawls in when the world is still, when city lights flicker faintly through your window, and you lie wide awake, trying to shut out the thoughts that consume you. That silence is different. It doesn't comfort. It suffocates. It wraps around you like cold chains, tightening with every breath you take. The silence Diddy felt now wasn't the quiet calm of a luxury retreat, or the serene emptiness of an expensive penthouse. No, this was a prison of the mind, the kind that grows louder the longer you're trapped inside it. When the harsh fluorescent lights flicker off and the steel door clangs shut, the real silence begins. It's not just the absence of sound. It's the presence of something far more insidious, the weight of your own thoughts. They swirl, whispering your worst fears, reminding you of the man you used to be and the one you're terrified you'll become. Each moment in this silence feels like an accusation, a judgment that cuts deeper than any words could. It's a silence that doesn't let you escape, doesn't let you breathe. It shows you every regret, every mistake, forcing you to confront them head-on, with no way to run or hide. The physical toll, a body deteriorating. In the first few weeks, the transformation was subtle. No one could have predicted just how deep the change would go, but I could see it. His body was failing him in ways he couldn't escape, and he didn't have the luxury of ignoring it. His skin, once radiant and full of that unmistakable glow that comes with power and fame, began to lose its luster. It wasn't just the lack of sunlight or fresh air, it was something deeper, something inside that no amount of money or status could fix. He had that hollow look now, like a man who'd been drained of something vital. There was no longer that confident bounce to his step, no rhythm to the way he moved. He was careful now, tentative. Like every step, every breath, was a conscious effort to hold it all together. He had once moved like someone who owned the world. Now, the world seemed to be slowly, steadily slipping away from him. His weight loss was the first sign. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a slight looseness in his jumpsuit, his face losing some of its fullness. But then, it became impossible to ignore. His cheekbones became more prominent, carving sharp lines down his face. His eyes, once bright with mischief and fire, began to sink deeper into his skull. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in years. He looked like a man who wasn't just fighting the physical toll of this place, but something else, something internal that he couldn't escape. His body was turning against him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Whispers in the dark, the prison's true nature. It wasn't long before the whispers started. Prison has a way of amplifying every rumor, every half-truth. And when you're a man like Diddy, once at the top of the food chain, untouchable, beloved by millions, those whispers become dangerous. People didn't care about the facts anymore. They didn't need to know the truth. What mattered was the story, and in this place, everyone had their own version of it. Some speculated it was stress, the kind that comes with a high-profile life that demands more than anyone should give. Others whispered that paranoia had set in. They talked about his deteriorating mental state, about his irrational fears, and the way he seemed to be shrinking, becoming smaller with each passing day. But the darkest rumors were the ones that slithered through the prison like snakes, the ones that hinted at something far worse. They talked about diseases, about whispers of HIV, and secrets too horrific to fully comprehend. In this place, a man's reputation was as fragile as his body, and both were being chipped away. The whispers weren't just about the sickness that was slowly consuming him. They were about the things he was hiding. Food as a weapon. The subtle torture. One of the most insidious aspects of prison life isn't the bars or the chains. It's the constant, gnawing fear that comes with every meal. He used to be a man who controlled every aspect of his life, every bite, every drink. He could choose what went into his body, could trust the hands that prepared his food. But here, in this concrete jungle, that wasn't the case. Every meal was a gamble. One drop of poison, one slip of the hand, and everything could be over. That kind of fear eats away at you. It gets inside your head and makes you question everything. Every time he picked up his tray, I could see it in his eyes. He didn't trust it, didn't trust the guards who served it, didn't trust the inmates who might have slipped something in, didn't trust anything. At first, he tried to eat, just enough to stay alive. But soon, it wasn't enough. He ate less and less, just enough to survive, but not enough to live. The fear of being poisoned was enough to make him lose his appetite entirely. The food was tasteless, sure, but it wasn't just the lack of flavor. It was the knowledge that it could be laced with something far worse. The limp, a man's struggle to maintain control. Then there was the limp, the one thing that no amount of fame or money could fix, the one thing that prison couldn't take from him. It wasn't just a physical injury. It was a reminder of a life he could no longer access. Before, when he was dancing, running, performing, he had access to the best care, the best rehab. But in here, he was lucky if the medicine wasn't expired, if the mattress wasn't more painful than the concrete floor. The bad knee, the injury that had plagued him for years, was getting worse. He used to walk with purpose, with confidence, but now, every step was a reminder of his mortality. Every step was slower, more careful, more tentative. He tried to get medical attention, of course, but in this place, nothing happens fast. Nothing happens unless it has to. And when you're a celebrity behind bars, when you're just another number in a system that doesn't care, things move slower than ever. The request for an MRI took weeks. By the time they finally gave him one, the damage was done. His limp was so pronounced that he couldn't hide it anymore. But the chains, the shackles, they weren't just there for his protection. They were there to remind him of where he was. And the longer the chains rattled, the more they began to sound like judgment. The ride to the hospital, a world he no longer recognized. The ride to the hospital was one of the longest moments of his life. The tinted windows of the van showed him a city that had moved on without him. No cameras at intersections, no fans screaming his name, just ordinary people walking by, living their lives as if he no longer existed. He didn't recognize it. It was as if the world had shifted, leaving him behind in a place where he didn't matter. The man who had once been the center of it all, now a forgotten relic, abandoned by everyone, even by the city that had once adored him. The hospital was cold, sterile, and indifferent. He wasn't a celebrity anymore. He wasn't a mogul. He was just another prisoner. No one cared who he was. No one asked for an autograph. No one even acknowledged his presence. He was a number, a patient, nothing more. The MRI machine buzzed around him, loud and mechanical, but all he could think about was how it reminded him of the studio, the silence that hung just before the beat dropped. But there was no beat here, just the sound of survival, the worsening whispers, the prison's psychological grip. As the weeks passed, the whispers grew louder. They saw the limp, the weight loss, the hospital trip, and the rumors spread faster than wildfire. He's worse than we thought. You heard about that HIV thing? These weren't just idle speculations. They were the kinds of rumors that could destroy a man. They took his image and turned it into something grotesque, something monstrous. He tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. How do you ignore being watched all the time? How do you ignore being picked apart, dissected? when you were once the one doing the watching. He started sticking to himself more, retreating into his cell, avoiding eye contact, avoiding conversations. The guards didn't need to do anything to him. They just watched, their eyes filled with something that could have been pity, or maybe amusement, or maybe something darker. The moment he snapped back at a guard, the power dynamic shifted. There was no more pretending. In this place, he wasn't in control. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't untouchable. He was just another man. And that fact was eating him alive. The final crack. The moment he truly broke. It wasn't until Christmas passed that he truly broke. No calls, no visits. The world had moved on, and he was left in a cold, empty cell. His name, a distant memory. The last straw came when a guard, no doubt tired of seeing him waste away, dropped off his food tray with a snide remark. Diddy snapped. For the first time in weeks, he lunged at the bars, fists pounding against the metal. He screamed, a wild, broken sound that echoed through the silent prison. Every fear, every frustration, every ounce of humiliation that had been building inside him exploded in that moment. But the guard didn't flinch. He didn't react. He just stood there, watching him like a man watches a bird break its wings. And then, as if satisfied by the spectacle, the guard muttered under his breath, "That's what I thought." And that was it. Diddy slumped back into his cell, his body heaving with sobs. The man who had once controlled everything, who had built an empire, was now nothing more than a shell of himself. The man who had once been untouchable could no longer control his own breath. The true silence, forgotten and invisible. The worst part? No one outside even noticed. The world had forgotten him, not with a bang, but with a slow, suffocating silence. He had once been a name synonymous with power, wealth, and influence. His face plastered across magazines, his voice a constant presence on the airwaves. But now he was invisible, swallowed by the indifference of a society that moved on without him. The streets that once screamed his name in adoration now whispered of his fall, as if it had never happened at all. And when the world forgets you, it doesn't shout. It doesn't strike you down with a public scandal or a headline that demands attention. Instead, it simply stops speaking your name. It's a quiet, insidious kind of erasure, a complete disappearance, without so much as a ripple. One day, you're the center of attention, and the next, you're just gone. It wasn't the flashing lights or the cameras he missed. It was the feeling of being seen, of existing in the collective consciousness of millions. Now, in his cell, the silence was deafening. The phone calls, the text messages, the tweets, all gone. The fame that had once shielded him now felt like a distant echo. And in that silence, he began to realize the true nature of being forgotten. It wasn't the absence of noise, but the absence of anyone who cared enough to even notice.